Okay, I'm live. Well, today we're going to talk about some questions that students have from biodiversity class. So this semester, I'm teaching this new introductory class in biology just called Biodiversity, and it's geared toward freshmen. Well, as part of their participation, I make them ask a question each class period. So I'm going to answer some of their questions. So I have about 50 students in the class, and basically these questions, I just took half of them, and let's see what they said. All right. Question. Do you think it is possible for humans to be the only species on Earth? And the answer to that is absolutely not, especially when we consider bacteria. Just in our guts alone, we have over 1,000 species or different types of bacteria in our gut. I don't know that species actually apply to bacteria, but we have lots and lots of bacteria. We have fungus. We have other things that grow on us as well. And then if we were the only people or the only species on the planet, we wouldn't have any way of having any food. So the answer to that is we might really collapse diversity and cause a lot of extinctions, but we will never be alone on this planet. It will just be a more simple planet. Okay. What makes a theory of evolution more reliable? Well, that's a really good question. And scientific theories are supported by a lot of evidence, but based on experiments and observations. And the in 100 and what has it been? Oh my gosh, 60 years since Darwin published The Origin of Species in 1859, every experiment, every observation has supported the theory of evolution by natural selection. So evolution is a fact. Species change over time. Natural selection is the evolutionary theory, and that provides the mechanism. That's why species change over time. And we've experimented and shown this over and over and over and over and over and over again. So we can look at evidence from like the fossil record to your own DNA and see that evolution is very, very reliable. Okay. And the next question, they followed up. Why is it difficult for a lot of people to believe in the theory of evolution? Well, there's a couple of different reasons for that. One is Western culture has been strongly influenced by Aristotle, Plato, and Socrates, all these Greek philosophers that believed in perfection and that all life was created at some point in the past, and there was a perfect form for every species. And basically, any deviation from that form is a deviation from perfection. And that has permeated Western culture, that idea of perfect forms in an unchanging world. And the other thing is evolution takes place on geological timescales a lot of times. So it's hard for us to understand the amount of time and how old the Earth is and how much change could actually occur because, let's face it, human lives are way too short. Okay, here's another one. Have humans stopped evolving? And what would happen to the world if humans just disappeared right now? Actually, humans have not stopped evolving. And in fact, the rate of our evolution is probably picking up because now we have 7.8 billion people. And in every generation, there are new mutations. And those new mutations create more variation of population than natural selection can act upon. And so I have no idea what we're evolving into, but we're still evolving. And if the humans left the world right now, a lot of weird things would happen. All of our cities and roads and everything would decay. We'd have some massive nuclear explosions from all of our nuclear power plants. But in the end, nature would quickly take over and it would be world diversity would start to increase. Okay, let's see. What is your favorite animal? And why? Any personal experiences with this particular animal? Oh my gosh, I don't know that I have a favorite animal. I have so many animals that I like, but one of them is probably a limpkin. This is a wading bird in North Florida and found throughout the tropics, and they specialize on eating snails. And I grew up in North Florida where they were once abundant, and unfortunately they're gone now, but that's one of my favorite animals. I have so many. It's so hard to choose. Can you breed an angiosperm plant species with a gymnosperm? So basically, can you cross a flowering plant with a pine tree? The answer is no. Okay, here's a good one. It's cold today. Like at my house out on the Eastern Plains, it was like 2 degrees Fahrenheit. And believe it or not, ducks can handle this as long as the water doesn't freeze totally. And the question is, why do ducks in the duck pond not get cold? So we have a duck pond here on UNM campus. and it'll almost freeze over. And it's like, these ducks are swimming in that pond with their feet down in there. If I put my feet in there, I'm going to freeze. The reason why they can do it is they can actually shunt blood flow away from their feet, and they don't lose as much heat through their feet. Okay. How many different species do you think there are on Earth? Oh my gosh, I have no idea. 10 million. We got to figure out how we classify bacterial diversity. We have no idea. The bacteria are so incredibly diverse. When it comes to animals, probably several million, like 3 to 4 million. And the other large unknown with different species is also in fungus. Most fungus you can't see. We think of fungus as like mushrooms, but a lot of them are microscopic, and we don't see them. So we don't know how many there are. And we know that they're very important. They live on animals, they live on us, and they live symbiotically with a lot of different plants. Or in fact, fungus are actually incredibly important for plants and how they get their nutrients in their roots. Let's see what we got here. What other types of creatures live at the bottom of the ocean? How do we know? Well, a lot of echinoderms and snails, so things like starfish and sea urchins live at the bottom of the ocean. And it depends on how deep you go. If you only go a few thousands of feet, you can find some types of sharks and fish. And I believe even in the deepest part of the oceans, they found fish as well. And the way we know, we've actually been down there. We've sent submarines down the bottom of the ocean, and we've seen these things. I myself have been about 2,200 feet down the bottom of the Gulf of Mexico, and it was teeming with life around one of these methane seeps. Okay, how do people know how a dinosaur sounds if not a single person was born at that time? Well, good question. We really don't know how dinosaurs sound, but we know that they were probably vocal. And as we gather more evidence and more fossils, and then maybe even some soft tissues eventually, we could look at their voice box or their larynx or whatever they have, syrinx, and determine something about how they sound. Other than that, it's pure speculation. Maybe I'm wrong. Was Archaeopteryx the first flying animal or just the first bird? Ooh, that's a good question. Archaeopteryx is a transitional organism between, it has characters of dinosaurs and birds. So for instance, it's got claws on its wing. It's also got teeth in its bill, and it's got a bony tail. So it's like got these characters of both birds and dinosaurs that had feathers and could fly. It was probably amongst the first flying birds. It was not the first animal to fly. The first animals to fly were, of course, the insects, and they evolved flight nearly 100 million years before the first vertebrates flew, which were, of course, the pterosaurs that started flying in the Mesozoic, about 200 million or earlier, more than 200 million years ago. And in fact, vertebrates are kind of cool. We evolved flight 3 times with pterosaurs, birds, and bats. Let's see what we got here. How have humans made the Earth less biodiverse compared to before? Oh man, we have opened up a number on this planet. Mostly habitat loss. We have cut down forests, and we've put up, cattle ranches, or we cut down forests just to have our cities. So that habitat loss has caused enormous amounts of loss in diversity. We've also polluted our environment as well. We've fragmented our habitat, and we've hunted things to extinction, and we've introduced invasive species that have also caused the loss of biodiversity as well. So we have done many things that are causing the loss of biodiversity. And one of the biggest threats to biodiversity is all of those things combined: invasive species, habitat loss, pollution, and now we're exacerbating that even more. We're making it much worse with global climate change. So as a result, we are now in the 6th mass extinction. The extinction we're in is equivalent to when the dinosaurs went extinct. Are GMOs bad for diversity? No, they're not. In fact, in some ways, they're actually very helpful, because with making GMOs in crops, we can improve our yield, we can reduce fertilizer and water use, and that's a good thing. And we can reduce pesticide use as well, which is very good for biodiversity. However, we do have problems with farming. No matter what we do, we're going to impact our world. And growing crops to feed 7.8 billion people is going to have an impact. But anything we can do to improve yields, reduce waste by improving shelf life, or reducing fertilizer use, water use, herbicides, pesticides. All of these things will help biodiversity in the long run. So yes, GMOs can help with that, including helping with nutrition. So GMOs are actually good for the environment. If you hear things that are contrary to that, you're probably listening to propaganda out there. There's so many people that are against GMOs, and it's unfortunate because GMOs are part of our solutions. Okay, well, here's a good one. Why are arthropods the most diverse species in the world? Well, first of all, arthropods are a phylum of animals. They're a group of animals that include both insects, crustaceans, um, centipedes and millipedes, as well as the arachnids, which are commonly known as spiders and scorpions and the mites and ticks and things like that. For whatever reason, having that hard exoskeleton with the jointed limbs is just a body plan for success. And you can make very small modifications to that body plan, to like a mouth part or a wing or a leg, and all of a sudden you have an animal that's doing something completely different. So arthropods are able to diversify quite rapidly by making small changes to their body plan. Okay, how exactly did I learn everything about biodiversity? Biodiversity is my hobby. I love biodiversity. I started out birding when I was very little. My grandfather and my dad taught me the local birds. My grandfather especially taught me like the local birds and the flowers. And I always was impressed with his natural history knowledge. And I have bought field guides. I have gone out with people that know more than me and have spent, my lifetime basically learning the names of plants and animals and what they're doing in the environment, where to find them. So it's a long journey, and to distill some of that knowledge into a small class that's only a semester long is hard. So I get excited about all these different things. Okay, are mosquitoes one of the most deadly species? Absolutely. And in fact, the mosquito is the deadliest animal on the planet because mosquitoes spread more diseases, especially malaria, dengue, Zika, that have killed humans than any other thing in the world. Well, actually, that's the malaria that's killed more humans than any other single disease. So mosquitoes as a vector for carrying diseases are deadly. And I've got blogs about why we should eradicate these 4 or 5 mosquito species that spread diseases. No, the world would not miss them, and humans would be better off. And we would spend a lot less money spreading broadband pesticides that wipe out all insects, both good and bad, trying to eradicate mosquitoes. So if we could get rid of the couple ones that are bad, everything else would do better. Do you think in the future we'll discover a species out in space that can withstand pressure and cold, or the lack of pressure? The answer is, tardigrades and maybe bacteria out there can probably survive some interplanetary conditions for a few years. I don't know how long. It's pretty brutal out there. It's super cold, and there's a lot of radiation from the solar wind and cosmic rays coming in that can really damage life big time. But yeah, I mean, there's probably a few things that could hitch a ride on an asteroid for a few tens of years. I don't know how long some of these things could survive. It's been postulated that they do. Some people think that when giant meteors hit the Earth, that it's going to kick up parts of the crust, and those bacteria could survive, actually land on moons and planets within the solar system, and actually form a seed of life to those other bodies. Okay. Oh, well, I'm not sure I can answer that one. How do I feel about fungi? Mixed feelings. Depends on what fungi we're talking about. Some fungus if they grow on the bottom of your feet and are itching, not so much. Fungus that get into our plants, into our food crops, and make us hallucinate or get sick, I don't like those too much either. The fungus that wipes out the frogs and the amphibians, the chytrid fungus, not so big on that one either. Now, that being said, some fungi are really pretty. Some of the ones you see out in the woods are really cool to look at. I enjoy finding those and taking photos of them, and they serve an incredibly important purpose in our ecosystems. They are decomposers, so they break down organic matter and kind of release the nutrients back into the world, especially the minerals. So that's a good thing. And also, fungus are really important for plants. They wrap around the roots of plants. It sounds bad, but it actually helps plants get more nutrients from the soil. And plants actually, when they're in the not best habitat, really come to rely on those fungus to help them obtain the nutrients they need to survive. So, like I said, mixed feelings about fungus. If they're growing on my bread, in my refrigerator, on my fruit that I bought yesterday, no, I get mad about that. But other than that, yeah, they can be very, very beneficial in our world. Okay, why is parasitism so common in the animal kingdom? That's a really good question. It's way abundant. In fact, humans were lucky we don't have as many parasites as our ancestors or other animals. But basically, animals are nutrient rich. We have a lot of nutrients in us. So if you can exploit our nutrients without killing us, why not? So I think a lot of different animals have evolved to exploit other animals and that plus minus relationship. Okay, here we go. Next one. What characteristics do humans share with insects? Is there possibly we share a common ancestor? That's a fantastic question. The answer to that, yeah, uh, we do share a common ancestor. I'm not sure when that common ancestor was. It probably dates back, gosh, 600 million years ago or more. It goes way back to the Proterozoic. So what do we share in common? Well, we have a mouth, we have an anus, and we have a tube that we eat. We feed by ingestion, and we have a tube that secretes different types of enzymes to digest the food we eat. So we've got a stomach, a small intestine, a large intestine. An insect has very similar features, right? They also have the same body plan as us in terms of having bilateral symmetry. They have a top, a bottom, a right, and a left. They have a head region. We share that with a common ancestor. Other things we share are at the molecular level. We share a lot of genes in common, especially what's called Hox genes. These are developmental and regulatory genes that lay out our body plan. So, for instance, we can actually swap genes around with fruit flies, an insect, and we can put some human genes in there for their regulatory genes, and they'll still grow a wing in the right way. They'll still grow an eye where it needs to go because we share a lot of these regulatory genes together. Okay. What is the significance of the Wallacean line in affecting diversity? Well, A.R. Wallace was out doing a lot of natural history, making lots of collections in the Indo-Pacific, and he was going all the way from Australia up into like Southeast Asia. And what he realized is there was this big break in the fauna. One was more related to like the Australia region, one was more related to Southeast Asia, and he called that the Wallace Line, where this big break in species, and that has to do with a deep ocean current separating those southern islands from the more Southeast Asia islands during the last ice age. So during the last ice age, when sea levels were 300 feet lower than today, a lot of those islands were connected. It was one giant landmass, but there was a deep ocean trench, which is basically where the Wallace Line is, that formed a barrier to a lot of these things from Southeast Asia getting down into like Papua New Guinea and into Australia. Okay, and that's it. That was a fun answering all those questions, and I will do this again next week. And until then, have fun, and I hope you enjoyed some of these answers.